All right, let's talk about something that so many of us who eat roti have wondered about. How in the world do you manage that blood sugar spike after a meal? Is the answer really as simple as just eating less? Well, today we're diving into a really cool experiment that puts that exact question to the test.
I mean, this is such a classic frustrating situation, right? You're trying to do the right thing, you cut your rotis down from 4 to 2, and you're thinking, okay, I've got this. But then you look at your glucose monitor, and it's telling a completely different story. That spike is still there. So what on earth is going on? What's the missing piece of this puzzle?
So, the thinking for most of us is pretty logical. It goes like this. Carbs raise your blood sugar. So, if you cut back on the carbs, in this case the rotis, you should, in theory, get a smaller blood sugar spike. I mean, it makes perfect sense on paper. But does that simple math actually hold up in the real world? Or is there something else at play here? Something that maybe we've been overlooking? Let's see what the experiment found out. Okay, so to get a real answer, we've got to look at this simple but honestly brilliantly designed meal experiment. The whole idea was to figure out what really moves the needle on our glucose levels when we sit down for a totally normal meal of roti, dal, and sabzi. So here's the setup. On one side, you've got the baseline meal, 4 rotis with your standard dal and sabzi. And on the other side, the experimental meal. They cut the rotis in half, down to just 2. But, and this is the important part, they added a good 150 grams of paneer bhurji. The dal and sabzi are the same in both. So the key is we're not just taking carbs away, we're actively replacing them with protein and fat. And this, right here, is the genius part of the experiment. This is the control group. What happens if you just cut the rotis from 4 to 2 and don't add anything else? This is what's going to tell us if cutting carbs alone is enough. And trust me, this is where the story gets really, really interesting. All right, let's get to the good stuff, the results. And they are pretty surprising. The data here tells a really fascinating story. And boom, here's the whole story in one simple chart. Just look at this. The first bar, that's the 4 roti meal, caused a 40 milligram spike. Now look at that second bar, the 2 roti meal with absolutely nothing added. The spike is exactly the same, 40 milligrams. But then, look at that third bar, the 2 roti meal with that delicious paneer added in. The spike gets cut by nearly half, all the way down to just 22 milligrams. Incredible. Let's just pause on that for a second, because this is probably the biggest shocker. The very act of cutting your carbs in half, by itself, did absolutely nothing, zero, to reduce the glucose spike in this experiment. It just didn't work. Now, this number, 22 milligrams, this is the real game changer. This isn't just a tiny bit better. It's a massive, massive improvement. It shows us that the strategy of replacing carbs, not just reducing them, has a seriously powerful effect. And hey, that's a direct quote from the source of this experiment. You can just feel the excitement in that statement, right? Because it confirms a simple, yet unbelievably effective strategy for managing our meals. It's a true aha moment. And just to prove this isn't some kind of one-off paneer-specific magic, check this out. A different experiment with eggs gave almost identical results, a 20 milligram spike. So this really proves the principle. It's adding the protein and fat that's controlling the spike. And that is great news, because it means we've got options. So the data is pretty clear, right? But what does this actually mean for you when you're making dinner tonight? Let's turn this amazing discovery into a super practical new meal strategy. Well, the science behind why this works is actually pretty simple. You can think of it as the protein-fat buffer. When you add enough protein and fat to your meal, they kind of act like a brake. They slow everything down, especially how quickly the glucose from the carbs hits your bloodstream. So instead of that sharp, sudden spike, you get a much gentler, rolling hill. So the new mindset, the new way of thinking about this, isn't about deprivation. It's not about cutting things out. It's really a strategy of addition. The magic happens when you thoughtfully replace those carbs with something that's going to work for you, not against you. So let's break it down into 3 easy-to-follow steps. First, start with whatever your carb is, roti, rice, you name it. Second, make a conscious choice to reduce the portion. But, and this is the absolute key, step 3 is to fill that gap on your plate by adding a quality source of protein and fat, like paneer, eggs, or even more dal. So if you remember one thing, let it be this. Just eating less roti probably isn't the solution you're hoping for. The real secret weapon is what you add to your plate, that protein and fat source. And you know the best part about all this? This knowledge gives you so much more freedom and control. It lets you build meals that are satisfying and keep your blood sugar steady.
You know, this discovery really opens up a world of possibilities. It's not just about paneer or eggs. This is a principle you can apply to any meal you make. So, the final question is for you to think about. What simple food swap will you try next? What protein or fat are you going to add to your plate to put this powerful strategy into action?